Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Wednesday, July 15th, 2026, episode 547, and we're going to solve racism today. So I was watching a Sam Morril, I think I'm saying that, Morril, reel on YouTube. And so he's a comedian and he was doing a bit and audience. And I guess he's one of those guys that uh, does comedy as he interacts with the audience, which I think is a great talent. And also as a comedian, I would imagine it makes life a little bit easier because you don't have to prepare as much material, right? So you can have a smaller amount of material and then have it organically generate as you're talking to the audience. So an audience member demands that he solve racism. And there's a lot of laughing because like, who can solve racism? And he doesn't reply himself. He doesn't give an answer. And so I'm going to provide one. So racism actually is not a problem that needs to be solved. As distasteful as it might be to some people, we have to realize that it's part of being a human being. And the kind of racism that we see today, which is so hateful and makes people feel really uncomfortable and awkward, especially if you were to say something like, yeah, it's not really a big deal, which is something I frequently say in the classroom. That kind of racism is a creation of people who have narrow subjectivities. They see the world through a tube and they focus in on something and they use the language that we use, except they use it with a particular sloppy definition. And so that's why we have this kind of unjust fight against injustice, right? But the solution is really simple. It's let people be free with responsibility. So allow people to do whatever it is that they want, except they have to take responsibility for all the things that they do. And I've gone into that many, many times before. So let's just go into the race aspect of it rather than the responsibility aspect. But seriously, if we go back to the beginning, race is just a generalization using a single identifiable characteristic. If you can generalize something, you can create a racial category about that something. And so, again, it's any characteristics, whether it's color, size, shape, age, complexity, it doesn't really matter. It's a characteristic, and the this characteristic can be generalized. Anything can be generalized. And what happens in the university is that perception is manipulated to focus mainly on skin color. But we already know that that is a very tenuous, very difficult to maintain position. And so you have to kind of play fast and loose whenever you want to discuss racism or racial dynamics. So that's what race is. Race is just simply a categorization or a generalization. And if you think about it, we generalize all the time. Mondays are bad. Weekends are great. We're always doing it, all right? Generalization. And no one really, when you generalize, no one ever sits there and says, oh, that's not a fact. You know, people aren't doing that because they know you're just generalizing. And so when people ignore the fact that you're simply generalizing, then it says that they have some sort of agenda or they're really kind of blind to their own subjectivity. Now, racism, if that's race, then racism is to see someone only through the signified racial category, uh, expect things from that person based on that racialization, and then treat that person based on that category, treat the person according to the category. Now, if anything satisfies this definition, then it's racism. So fatherhood is racist, right? I see my kids as my kids. I treat them as my kids, and I have expectations of them as my kids. So parenting is racist, marriage is racist, friendship is racist. Like, you're my friend. I expect certain things from you as my friend, and I treat you differently because you're my friend. Employee, employer, soldier, athlete. I mean, we can go on and on. And this extends to gender issues, age issues, cultural issues. I mean, if we were to end all generalization, then you can't treat babies like babies, right? You're generalizing. You can't do that. And it also extends to concepts, products, time periods, anything that can be generalized. Now, a lot of people will object, and I think someone did recently in one of my episodes, even though there's only a few people, a handful of people who listen to my stuff, but someone commented saying, "Oh, you're trivializing," or "Yeah, I'm not." Right? I'm clearly explaining what's going on, and anyone who wants to use the word like trivialize, what they're really saying is I'm undermining their ability to get angry, to look at specific things and say this is worse than anything else. But those kinds of people don't want a solution. They don't want resolution. They want to be angry because that's what they've built their identity, their personal identity, their life meaning is based on that narrow subjectivity. And I've said it before, when you get angry like that, you get this sort of righteous rage. You feel like you're somehow morally superior, like a superhero, without actually having any superpowers. And so people really love that. They love being right. They love being so sure of something that it gives them a sense of purpose, a certain place, especially when people push back against them. Then it gives them the sense of, wow, I really am among the minority who is in the know. Everyone else is just simply ignorant, right? And so that's where you get that kind of pushback. So racism, racialization or generalization is a group thing, but not everyone or everything in any generalization is exactly the same. And that's why we say we do this generalization and then we move to specifics or specificity. We move to the details. We say, oh, yeah, well, this is a kind of thing, but this is different from all the others because it has spots. So we do that. So once we generalize, like these are all butterflies, these butterflies have spots, and so you start to create distinguishing details. And that's what we do with people, right? White people, black people, yellow people, brown people, red people. You do that, but then you say, oh, but this person is different. And that's why we have this phenomenon called names, right? Your name is unique to you, and that is your identity. And the color of your skin, the pigmentation of your skin is only one characteristic of many. I claim infinite number of characteristics that you have. And we're constantly adding, losing characteristics in our lives. Like I used to be a teenager. I'm not a teenager any longer. I used to be a student. I'm not a student anymore. I used to be single. Now I'm a parent. And so we add and subtract different elements of our identity, different characteristics, different generalizations that can be attached to us. However, once we had one, then the influence of having had it stays with us. Okay. And I won't go into more detail. I think you get the idea. However, today, when people talk about racism, it's generally understood as concrete. Like it is in itself a thing. And most people can't describe it, right? Especially if you talk to a lot of Black scholars and you ask them to describe what the characteristics of whiteness are. They just laugh. Like it's a ridiculous question, but the laugh is actually a cover because they have no real answer. And so people who want to focus on Black oppression or oppression of colored people, right? What is that? BIPOC, people of color. So, you have to have a really narrow subjectivity and you want to pretend that certain racial characteristics are absolutely concrete. Uh, the lines of separation are extremely clear. And so how dare you not be smart enough to understand what I'm trying to say? But really what we're looking at here is a lot of sloppy definitions. And so when people focus on something like, say, Black oppression or oppression of colored people, what they're trying to do by this really narrow focus is hide the sloppiness of their definition and of their subjectivity. And to go one step further, because you don't want anyone challenging or questioning or analyzing any of this, which is really easy to do. I mean, I'm doing it right now. uh, you have to codify it, right? And so because it's only a narrow focus and because it's only focusing on certain generalizations and ignoring the infinite number of other generalizations, it's hypocrisy. And so all these attempts of bringing about equality and justice in society are just activities of injustice, like affirmative action, civil rights amendment, because you're catering to and focusing on certain people groups. So you're privileging certain and you're penalizing others. And so, based on this really narrow subjectivity, you are actually increasing injustice. And so you're doing the opposite of what you seem to claim you're doing. And if anyone who took the time to just think about it would be able to see. But again, as I said, people refuse to do that. And it's as simple as it is, because they gain so much by maintaining their narrow, hypocritical subjectivity. Now, when I talked about it in class, and I talked about it in nearly every class that I taught, because everyone wants to talk about racial issues, no matter what subject you're teaching. By the time I get to it, people get it. Like when I raise it, it's not a big controversy because it's logically follows everything else that I was saying. And so it goes down pretty easy. And I think a lot of my colleagues were always shocked at how much of a good time students had in my class. Because once you establish that, then you start looking and seeing all the other generalities that are out there. And you realize that there is so much more potential in life once you get off narrow subjectivities, once you start having a broader view of life, more choices, more probabilities, more possibilities, more options, they start appearing before you. And so problems uh, are really a problem, a manifestation of the lack of knowledge. I always say this. So getting out of the box, right, which is my thumbnail, get out of the box. Once you get out of the box, I mean, you realize that a lot of these problems that confront us in life, that bring us down, that make us miserable, is just a it's just a manifestation or a signal to us that we got to do more learning, right? And so once you begin to understand race and racism properly, then you realize that it's not by itself a problem for all of society. It's an individual problem. It's a person's perception that is a problem for that person and that person alone. When you start then saying, no, everyone has this problem, and if you don't think you have this problem, it's because you don't understand. No, I don't understand because I don't have that same subjectivity. And with my subjectivity, I don't have this problem, right? And this is why you have to codify this kind of narrow subjectivity into law, creating a whole lot of hypocrisy and injustice. So racism, as most people understand it today, is just simply codified subjectivity. What one believes is race and race dynamics, you make it into law. Not everyone has to frame things in that way because it's by law, and that that law is reinforced by litigation. So you violated that law. I'm not going to send you to jail, but I can sue you for racism and for racist practice. And that actually is racist, right? So that's why I had that anti-Semitism is the new Black Lives Matter, or racist, or whatever people are screaming at each other. That is actually core racism, because not only are you privileging a narrow subjectivity, but it ignores and devalues everything else. Uh, the laws that people pass actually protect the very discrimination they claim they're trying to eradicate. And it's funny because, look at it this way, people begin to realize, oh, I'm doing the exact thing that I hate other people for. And so that's clearly hypocrisy, you see. And I know some people are thinking, oh, I didn't listen to your earlier episodes. I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean this is actually racist? Well, look, if I just gave everyone freedom, like, so let's say I'm a restaurant owner and I don't want to serve Asians at my restaurant. Okay. I'm an Asian hating Asian. So I don't want to serve Asians at my restaurant. Well, what's going to happen? Word gets out. I don't serve Asians at my restaurant. And so some people who hate Asians too, well, they might be tempted to come to my restaurant, but then everyone will know that they hate Asians too. So no one comes to my restaurant. The Asians don't come and no one else comes. So I don't want that. I realize that my customers are going away. I can't make any money, so I'll be going bankrupt very soon. So I don't want to do that. So I now have to I'm forced by public opinion, right? Not by any kind of legal measure, but because I don't want to go bankrupt, I serve everyone now. Okay. So then I have to change my mind. Like, oh, yellow money is good as any other money, right? So is white money, same as yellow money. So then my attitudes begin to change. They soften. Like I might still not like Asians, but I'll tolerate them, right? Because there's no point in being hostile to them. Now, flip it. Let's just say you pass a law that says everyone has to serve Asians. Well, I still hate Asians, right? And that was the core original problem. I hate Asians, which is why I didn't want to serve them. Now I'm being forced to by law. And so now I'm resentful. I'm full of resentment and anger. And that's not what we wanted. Although some people might feel good about themselves and pat themselves on the back. Who cares? Who cares about those people? I want to help educate people to see that their original attitudes were wrong. And obviously, if you didn't care, you're like, no, I want to hate Asians to my dying day, right? It's sort of like the Lindsey Graham approach to life. Well, then go bankrupt, right? And so no one wanted to eat at your restaurant anyway. And so someone else who takes over that building and that business, well, they'll have different attitudes, you see. And that's what we want. We want people who are actually racist to be punished and to learn something as well. We don't, and so many people, too many people today are so into that. Ooh, I want to show them what's what. I want to, get a dig on them. And that's just so petty. It's petty because it's not helpful. You're just simply another step in the circle of violence, if you want to use that kind of expression. But once you realize that everything is just simply an expression of subjectivity and preference, then you just allow people to have their choices and then you have to accept responsibility for the choices. So let's just say I hate women. I don't like women in my workforce. So I'm only going to hire men. But in order to get men to work for me, I have to pay them a little more, right? All right. So let's just say I have $100 in my budget for workers. I'm just using simple numbers. So I can hire 10 men and pay them $10 each. Okay, so hey, that's great. But female workers work for $5. So I can hire 20 female workers. And let's just say it's a business that doesn't necessarily require physical strength. Well, I have twice the number of workers if I hire women. So what happens? The business that only hires men, they go bankrupt. And the only businesses that are left are the businesses that hire women. And then once the women, they start, differentiating a little bit, the better female workers, they get more money. You see, that's how it used to work. But now it's like, oh no, I'm forced to hire a certain number of female workers. So that's all I'll hire. I'll hire the minimum number. And men still get paid what they want. And so we'll have a few women that get paid a certain amount, but I'm still a sexist, you see. And so this is the thing. This is not what we want. We want people to have to pay for this discrimination. We want people to have to pay for the way that they are going to make their choices. And if you find that you are being discriminated against, like you are the person that's being dismissed or not hired because of how people see you, then you find something else. You excel and beat everyone else at their game, right? So, what is it? And it can be your talent, your ability. I've talked about hidden figures and the computers, how their ability to do math, crunch numbers very quickly, made it so that you could not hire them. Jackie Robinson, the baseball player, right? His talent, his skills were so good that you can't afford not to hire him. And certain people break the color line, but obviously the rest of society is a little bit slow or coming around, right? But that's the thing. You force people to pay for their discrimination, and um, and things will change a lot faster. Things will improve quickly. In combination with this, we need to uphold justice. The legal system is extremely important. I'm sorry, I think I'm going to go a little bit long, but I need to be complete with such a delicate topic. Otherwise, I'll get a lot of hate one day if someone finds this video and uses it against me like they already did in my arbitration. But anyway, uh, uphold justice, allow people to take responsibility, make them pay. So allow the businesses to go bust. Don't pass any legislation that interferes with business. That's fascism, right? So just leave them alone. Allow people to seethe in their hate. Eventually, that will become too expensive. Most people will change. And the hardcore, the fanatics, they just go bankrupt, right? And it works with marriage, if you think about it. It works with any phenomena. I had a student who said that, and I've told this story before, but I had a student whose father hated big box stores like Costco. But before he went out to buy something, he would always check the circular. And I told her, well, you know what he's doing? He's seeing just how much his ideology is costing him. So the TV at his local store costs $500, but the same exact TV at a big box store is $250. So his position is costing him $250. And so he basically, either for self-satisfaction or trying to gauge just how much he's willing to spend to maintain that position. He's gauging it. And I told her, in the future, just watch for the day when he gives in. And it's most likely because of the cost. It's just too high. And so he's like, it doesn't matter. And then he'll probably blame something else, but there it is, right? Everyone is motivated by the cost of their choices. And for a lot of these racial situations, the actual cost of their choices is hidden or uh, or erased or removed through legislation. Now, so then basically, uh, violence, destruction of property, injury, etc., these kinds of negative things, they should be punished. If you have a good justice system, then any kind of destruction of property, including yourself, should be punished. And when people see that, it sends a clear message, and so people will be less likely to engage in that kind of behavior. Um, some people will say, well, what about, bad cops, prejudicial law enforcement? Yeah, well, then get rid of the monopoly status of law enforcement. Police unions, a lot of them, there are localized monopolies. So you get rid of the government protection, you make businesses compete to provide security, and solve the problem, move on, right? It's not a big deal. It only becomes a big deal when you introduce, special interest groups and their influence on elected officials. That you know, police protest this candidate. Well, if the government never had to pay in the first place, they weren't in charge of determining who are going to be police, then you don't have this problem. Um, so That being said, the worst offenders or the biggest racists in society are politicians, right? Because they cater to special interest groups, the interest groups that give them the biggest campaign funds, big donations, help them get elected, and they write legislation which favors these special interest groups. Politicians also use the language of racialization to their advantage in legislation, in committees, and bureaucracies. At the same time, they're engaging in wholesale discrimination legally. And that's the crazy thing, right? So they use the language of race and racism to pass all this legislation, which then means that they are actually being the biggest racists in society, and it's all legal. War, I already mentioned this several times, is a huge example of this. Politicians are sort of obligated to talk about how everyone in a different country deserves to die, including the little babies. But no one ever thinks about those details, right? Because we're living in the world of convenient generalization. So we get to ignore the truly vulnerable people, the exceptions to the rule. So, with a better way of looking at things, people get to live their lives with their preferences. Racializations which are signified are the ones that are, right, that people see. So, generalization categories that people see are the ones that are most important for that person at that moment. Right. So, and you could do away with all the excuses that people have to make, like, I don't see color, you know, please give me a break. The people who say stuff like, and I've said this before, people who say that, I don't see color, are the people who exactly see color because they're attracted to the person that they're with, which is why they're saying, I don't see color because it goes against standard social mores or norms. And so you have to sort of say, well, I just don't see color. No, you see color. You're attracted to that color. And that's why you're with that person. I mean, come on, give me a break. But racializations, which are signified, are the ones that are most valuable at that moment for the person making their choice. So why'd you make that choice? Well, because I wanted to. Now, standardization works similarly, right? It's this sort of imposition of a racial generalized standard. Why not substandard when it's appropriate? Like, I don't need all of this standardization. I just need a little bit. So substandard when appropriate, lower wages when appropriate, higher wages when appropriate, you know, danger. Oh, that's dangerous. That's risky. Well, some people like that danger. Some people want that risk. So let them. And so when you are stuck, you seek out different characteristics, which would undermine the existing status quo. So if everyone is doing it one way and you see a problem with it, well, then do it your own way. And if it really is a better way, then other people will start imitating you. In other words, when we have all this standardization, all this legislation about race, you are stifling innovation and creativity. In other words, the breaking of color lines uh, would be more frequent, right? You would see this much uh, with greater frequency because you don't have any restrictions any longer. Now you get to see what people would do, what their true motivations are, where they would go, and what they would do. And usually, when the breaking of color lines, if we were going to still use that expression, it's because it's too expensive to maintain a certain point of view. And so, in other words, the benefits outweigh the prejudices of a few people. And whenever this happens, we all benefit. And at the same time, it makes it extremely hard for there to be consolidated power, for there to be a status quo. So if power accumulation becomes more difficult, it means there's less corruption. I mean, there's still going to be, but there's going to be a lot less of it. We wouldn't be stuck in a war that no one wants, but we can't get out because everyone's too afraid to say something about it. So sure, why not? People should embrace this way of looking at the world. Um, but because a lot of people benefit right now, the more because so many people work for the government, the bureaucracies are so huge and there's so much money in it. whether by writing books or being the expert consultant or by suing other people, right? Then this is why people would rather perpetuate what is clearly just an exercise in subjectivity. But you few who understand what I just said can go out and be as creative and innovative as you want, not to be brought down by what other people would call a problem, but rather live a life where you're constantly resolving and solving problems as you live. That's it for today. I'll talk to you next time.